Welcome to a new episode of Dark Nature, the channel where we reveal the mysteries and curiosities of planet Earth. Imagine for a moment that we are in the year 1533. The Spanish conquistadors, led by Francisco Pizarro, have just executed the Inca Emperor Atahualpa. However, rumors of a city made of gold, El Dorado, continue to burn in their minds. It is said that a small group of explorers ventured into the deep jungle, following the Amazonian riverbeds. Months later, the few who returned did not speak of gold, but of nightmares. They spoke of giant spiders, snakes that devoured men, and most incredible of all, a river that boiled from the depths of the earth, capable of cooking a soldier in armor in a matter of seconds. For centuries, these accounts were archived as the ravings of men feverish with malaria. Today we know they were not delusions. We are in the heart of Mayantuyacu, in the Huánuco region of Peru. Here, the Asháninka River flows, defying all traditional geological logic. For a river of this size to boil, you would normally need an active volcanic system within 10 to 20 kilometers. The problem? The nearest volcano to the Asháninka is more than 700 kilometers away. It is a physical impossibility according to traditional textbooks. Let's talk about figures that will make your head spin. The river maintains temperatures between 45 degrees Celsius and nearly 100 degrees Celsius over a length of more than 6 kilometers. This isn't just a small stream of hot water, it is a massive torrent. At its widest point, it measures 25 meters across, roughly half the width of an Olympic swimming pool, flowing with water at the boiling point. The volume of thermal energy this river releases into the atmosphere is approximately gigawatts of power. If we could capture that heat, we could perpetually power a large portion of the Amazon region. Andrés Rizzo, the geoscientist who put this place on the world map, had to fight the skepticism of his own professors at SMU. They told him it was impossible, that if such a river existed, it would already be known. But the jungle is an expert at keeping secrets. When Rizzo finally arrived, he didn't just find hot water, he found a hydrothermal system unique in the world. The water here doesn't have the rotten egg smell of sulfur typical of the geysers in Yellowstone or Iceland. It is pure, crystalline, and lethal water. Chemical analyses showed that the water has an isotopic signature matching the rainwater from the Andes Mountains, but it has undergone a recycling process of biblical proportions. What kind of giant geological boiler is hidden beneath the Amazon basin to heat such a vast amount of water without the presence of a single active volcano? Light bulb siguientes pasos. To understand how this river cooks everything in its path, we must mentally descend into the depths of the earth. The key concept here is the geothermal gradient. For every kilometer we go down toward the center of the planet, the temperature rises by about 25 degrees Celsius. This is normal. What is not normal is that the Asháninka acts as a massive heat sink for a giant fault line. The rainwater that falls in the Andes Mountains seeps through porous sediments and tectonic cracks. This water descends to a depth of between 3 and 5 kilometers. At that depth, the pressure is crushing and the temperature of the rocks is well above 100 degrees Celsius. The water heats up, but because of the extreme pressure, it does not turn into steam immediately, it becomes a superheated, superpressurized liquid. This is where the magic of geology comes in. The water finds a highway back to the surface. A vertical geological fault that acts like a chimney. The hot water, being less dense than cold water, is shot upwards with immense hydraulic force. Imagine a geyser, but instead of an intermittent explosion, it is a constant, eternal flow that has been happening for millennia. But let's talk about the visual impact you would see as a spectator. As you approach the river, the first thing you notice isn't the heat, but the sound. It is a constant roar, a hiss of steam emerging from the rocks. The ground beneath your feet is not solid, it is a boiling mud that can burn the soles of your boots if you stand in one place for more than 10 seconds. Visibility in the cool mornings is barely a few meters due to the dense fog of steam. Geoscientists have documented that in the hottest zones, the water bubbles with such violence that it looks like there is a flame underneath. In these sections, known as the pools of death, the temperature is 97 degrees Celsius. To put this into scientific perspective, at the altitude of the Peruvian jungle, water boils at about 98 degrees Celsius to 99 degrees Celsius. We are talking about a river that is, literally, 1 degree away from turning entirely into steam. This energy doesn't just heat the water, it alters the entire ecosystem. The riverbanks are covered in red and white clay that has been cooked by the water. Trees that grow too close to the riverbed have dead roots or have adapted in strange ways. There is a specific area known as the Cathedral of Steam, where the trees are gigantic and the moss glows with a fluorescent green due to the constant 100% humidity, creating an atmosphere that looks like it belongs on another planet. Could this system of hot veins be proof that the Earth has a circulatory system far more complex and active than what we have been told in geology books? To truly understand the Asháninka, measuring its temperature or analyzing its pH is not enough. We must dive into the psyche of those who have coexisted with this liquid hell for centuries. In the heart of the jungle, the border between science and myth dissolves into the steam. For the inhabitants of the Asháninka community, the river is not a geological phenomenon, it is a conscious entity. Its name, Asháninka, boiled with the heat of the sun, is itself a metaphor for a cosmogony where the stars and the earth are connected by invisible threads of fire. Let's talk about the Yacumama, the mother of the waters. According to oral tradition passed down for over 400 years, the river is the trail left by a giant cosmic serpent that descended from the heavens. At the source of the river, there is a rock formation that local shamans protect with absolute zeal. It is not just stone, to them, it is the petrified head of this deity. They say the water comes out boiling from its jaws because the serpent still breathes beneath the earth's crust. This belief is not a simple superstition, it is the ethical code that has kept this ecosystem pristine. While in other parts of the Amazon the jungle is seen as a resource to be exploited, in Mayantuyacu, the jungle is a temple where one false step can awaken the water's wrath. The healing rituals here are of astonishing complexity. The master shaman of the area, a figure described with almost reverential respect, does not use the boiling water directly. There is a thermal graduation technique that has been perfected over millennia. Shamans collect the water in clay pots at dawn, when the river's energy is, according to them, at its purest. Then, they use a specific blend of Amazonian plants, such as Psychotria viridis and other secret barks, to create infusions activated by the river's residual heat. The river's steam is used as a medicinal sauna. The patient is placed on a wooden platform over the boiling current, wrapped in hand-woven cotton blankets. The goal is not just to sweat, it is to inhale the spirit of the water. Locals claim that the steam of the Asháninka has the ability to cleanse the lungs of dense energies and heal skin infections that Western medicine, with all its antibiotics and creams, can barely mitigate. But the relationship with the river has a much darker side. There are accounts of spiritual cleansings that border on the terrifying. It is said that in times of conflict between tribes, the river was used as a test of truth. Those accused of treason had to swim across a section of the river. If the river accepted them, finding a lateral cold water current, they were declared innocent. If the river consumed them, it was considered that the Yacumama had delivered her sentence. These testimonies, though difficult to verify historically, add a layer of psychological terror to the place. Imagine the silence of the jungle, interrupted only by the hiss of steam, while a man gambles his life in water that can melt his skin in seconds. The respect the locals hold for the Asháninka was not born out of thin air, it was born from witnessing real tragedies. At the beginning of the 20th century, during the natural resource boom in the Amazon, stories emerged of rubber tappers and gold seekers who, ignoring the warnings of the Asháninka, ventured into the zones of perpetual mist. The recovered diaries of some of these failed expeditions describe how deceptive the terrain is. What looks like firm ground covered in dry leaves is, in reality, a thin crust of sediment over a pool of boiling mud. There are records of men who, while trying to carry their equipment, sank up to their waists. In those conditions, rescue is impossible. Contact with 90 degrees Celsius water causes immediate thermal shock and the total loss of muscle function. Those who tried to help them often ended up with severe burns on their arms and legs, forced to abandon their companions to a scream muffled by the steam. Let's talk about the figures of the spiritual exclusion zone. The shamans of Mayantuyacu maintain a mental map of what they call hot energy points, where the water not only burns the body but, as they say, fragments the soul. These points coincide exactly with the highest emissions of geothermal gases. Modern science explains that inhaling these vapors in enclosed areas can cause hallucinations and spatial disorientation, which explains why so many intruders ended up walking directly into the riverbed instead of away from it. To the river's guardians, this isn't chemistry, it is the will of the Yacumama defending her territory from the impure, who seek gold instead of wisdom. Even in the 1930s, preliminary geological missions reported the disappearance of measuring instruments that simply melted or were sucked into cracks that opened and closed with minor seismic activity in the area. It is estimated that the cave system beneath the river is so vast it could house a network of unexplored tunnels stretching for hundreds of kilometers. The shamans claim these tunnels connect to the Uku Pasha, the underworld in Inca mythology. They say that on nights of a full moon, the river doesn't just boil, it sings, emitting a sonic frequency that jungle animals recognize, causing them to move completely away from the banks. To close this chapter of mysticism and danger, we must mention the ritual of the handover. When a shaman feels their time on earth is coming to an end, they take one last walk to the hottest point of the river. There, they deposit their sacred objects and the ashes of their ancestors. It is not an act of death, but of returning to the cycle of fire that feeds the jungle. This emotional and spiritual connection is what has saved the Asháninka from becoming a mere tourist attraction or an industrial complex. It is reverential fear that keeps the water boiling and the mystery intact. The history of Mayantuyacu tells us that in the 1970s, there were reports of ghost lights hovering over the river. While science attributes this to the combustion of organic gases, locals describe them as the spirits of those the river chose to keep in its bosom forever. How is it possible that a culture without modern technology managed to map such a lethal geological fault system without suffering a single casualty in centuries, while modern explorers with GPS and satellite maps still fear every step they take in Mayantuyacu? Entering the Asháninka with the intention of conducting formal scientific research is, possibly, one of the most complex challenges for a modern geologist. When the National Geographic team, led by Andrés Rizzo, arrived at the site, they didn't just face a geological enigma, they faced an environment that actively devours technology. It is not just about the temperature of the water, it is the extreme microclimate the river generates. In the deepest zones of the Mayantuyacu Canyon, the relative humidity stays constantly at 100%, and the air temperature can exceed 45 degrees Celsius due to the steam trapped by the dense jungle canopy. Let's talk about the logistics of survival. Researchers had to use military-grade thermal cameras and temperature sensors encapsulated in titanium to prevent their circuits from melting within minutes. Every time they attempted to measure the water flow in the center of the riverbed, they faced a hydraulic force that carries tons of hot sediment. The risk of a steam burn is constant and lethal. Steam is a high-temperature gas that can cook lung tissue if inhaled directly near an active fumarole. Because of this, the recordings we see in documentaries are usually made with carbon fiber poles several meters long, keeping the human being as far as possible from what the locals call the breath of the earth. One of the most fascinating discoveries of these expeditions was the analysis of extremophile microbiology. Samples were collected from rocks submerged at over 90 degrees Celsius, an environment where life, as we know it, should be impossible. What they found left biologists stunned: entire communities of bacteria that not only survive the heat but have evolved to feed on the minerals the water drags from the depths of the crust. These organisms are living fossils that give us clues about what life on Earth was like billions of years ago. Studying the Asháninka is, literally, looking through a window into the very origin of life in our solar system. However, this natural laboratory is under a silent siege. The great danger for this sanctuary in 2026 is not just the heat of the river, but what is happening at its borders. Illegal deforestation in the Huánuco region is advancing at a frantic pace. Because it is a hydrothermal and not a volcanic system, the river depends entirely on the infiltration of rainwater. If the jungle disappears, the soil becomes compacted, preventing water from seeping into the depths to be heated. Without that cycle, the Asháninka will turn into a dead stone bed in less than a decade. Andrés Rizzo and the Asháninka leaders are fighting for the area to be declared a national monument, but they face a slow bureaucracy and powerful economic interests. The boiling river is not just a geographic curiosity, it is a reminder that beneath our feet, the earth remains a place of fire, power, and mystery. If you've made it this far, it's because you share our passion for the most hidden secrets of our planet. Don't forget to subscribe to Naturaleza Oscura, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next expedition into the unknown. Will we be the generation that documented the roar of the boiling water in the Amazon for the last time, or will we be the ones who managed to protect the last great secret of modern geology before it is extinguished forever? Leave us your opinion in the comments. Do you think there are more rivers like this hidden in the unexplored corners of the world? Thank you for joining us on this journey. We'll see you in the next episode of Naturaleza Oscura, where the Earth still has many mysteries to reveal.